Folks, you guys are getting mad. I've been doing the folks. So 2022 and 2023 was a very, very difficult time in the card world. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about stories and moments of the bear market, because I feel like everybody forgot what we went through, because 2024 has been so good to everybody. Well, everybody in the card world. I feel like I need to give you guys a little bit of a reset and a reality check that the world is not all 2024. So, for those of you new to the channel, I've been doing this for about a decade. I have one of the longest running Patreon accounts at almost a decade now. And I was the first to market and the creator of the Patreon mixing YouTube business model and the videos and selling you guys cheap draft boxes and all the expansion and everything. So, and obviously the COVID 2020, 2021, we went through a very wild, euphoric time period that even I stated on this channel was a once in a lifetime black swan event. I never in a million years thought we would revisit another euphoric 2021, at least the first half of 2021, before the top in May of 2021. And then we didn't realize it, but the last 5 months in 2021, we were already dropping, but nobody really wanted to accept it. Nobody knew. Yeah, we thought it was just a little blip, right? A little correction. So that started the one of the greatest challenges of my recent years as an old man taco Rudy adult, and that was 2022 and 2023. It was an incredibly challenging, very turbulent, many dark days and nights in the card world where I questioned what I was doing was the right thing. Am I just burning all this money? And I spent my times defending the YouTube channel and defending the Patreon business model and defending selling the new products to you all and keeping some for myself. And this is a good long story time video to discuss the behind the scenes of some of the darkest hours of the 2022 and 2023 crash that you all don't know. Now, obviously, there are some things that occurred specifically in Q3, Q4 at the bottom of 2023 that I legally cannot make public or discuss in a YouTube video, especially when it comes to some deals, some transactions regarding Hasbro Wizards of the Coast, and of course some of the large inventory acquisitions through Magic the Gathering. We really can't go into that particular area, but be aware things like that did take place, but I can't discuss it on this channel. So, let's take a start here. I knew by about Q1 of 2021, I remember having conversations with the family and some other local friends here stating there is no way on God's green earth this market can stay the way it is. Between the card world and, of course, the stock market, I felt we are in an era of exaggerated everything. And the government stimulus checks, the warped perspective of the world ending and viruses and nothing was ever going to be the same and everything in person and 6 feet, do your part, and all these things that not everyone, but some people believed were going to be a permanent change in society, led to an unprecedented explosion in the collectible world and on Wall Street as people stayed home and traded stocks and became stockbrokers and, of course, became flippers, scalpers, and evil cardboard investors, right? So I remember some of the months and some of the sales that I would sell and they would still run up and people would be happy. I remember some of the sales I ran that would sell, they'd flatline, do nothing, and people thought, wasted time. Dump it on eBay. And then I remember some of the sales I ran where I sold it to, it just tanked. Dropped 10, 20, 30, 40, 50%. And it was the first time I had seen such extreme emotion from the public when it came to the short-term price swings. Now, before 2021, everybody, at least the perspective and the generally accepted approach, was that boxes of cards and reserve list cards and Pokemon, everything went up. But it was like a slow, normal thing. It took times, it took months, it took years. There was, the infamous Rudy's goal of 7 to 9% a year. All these things were more accepted and they were more normal. And then once we cross into the distorted reality of the post-COVID era, suddenly I started to notice the people making fun of my goal of 7 to 9% a year because inflation was 69%. So that was the first thing I remember noticing. It was a lot of people started laughing and ridiculing me that the 7 to 9% goal of appreciation on wealth or inventory that was usually pretty generally accepted and positive and everybody about for the previous 6-7 years on YouTube. It was all pretty, suddenly after 6-7 years of talking about the same thing, it became very like, oh wow, what a loser. Oh wow, that's bad. And that was the first thing I remember catching me off guard, was people talking about how those rates of return were obsolete. And what I was doing was old man grandpa mode. Old man Rudy was not up to date with the 10x your money and the altcoins and making 500x pumps and everything. And I started to notice that the perspective of the expectations of cards and crypto and the stock market started to, disconnect. And that was the first thing that made me go, oof. And that's when, again, I had conversations that I knew what was happening in 2021 was not going to be sustainable. And I knew there would be a moment when it would turn. Now, little did I know, going into the summer of 2021, that was the peak. May, June of 2021, you can hit the stock market. 2021, SPACs, of course, the previous crypto run, the real estate, you can see the moment where everything peaked. Now, we didn't know going into the end of 2021 that those little downticks were not downticks. They were the beginning of the, very hardcore roller coaster that we would be going straight down for the next 2 years. And nobody knew that, But I remember it was a very surreal time. And I remember making financial decisions for the business and myself under the premises that what was happening would end within 1 to 2 years. I remember those kind of decisions. Therefore, moving a lot of cash aside, being cautious on the items. A lot of people were upset because they were contacting me with vintage sealed Pokemon, with the whole Logan Paul Pokemon thing that was booming. And I remember people being upset because I wouldn't buy the vintage sealed Pokemon boxes that, is there some back here? Yeah, the vintage sealed Pokemon boxes. I've got a few back here from a long time ago. Now, I bought, this is now, for example, this is a Gym Challenge booster box, first edition, that I bought around 2018, 2017. This was $400 for a first edition Gym Challenge box. And I remember somebody trying to sell me another one of these for like $25,000 to $30,000 in 2021. And I remember thinking to myself, like, even to Rudy Bamboozle standards, like that's just not right. Like, it's just, now if somebody's willing to pay it, which somebody else did because the buyer ended up selling to somebody else, which is, hey, happy for them. Hey, that was what the market was. I just wasn't on board. Old man Rudy was just slow to just accept what was happening. So I remember that was the first thing is, I remember then some people being upset of like, wow, Rudy, you won't even pay 50 cents on the dollar for these Pokemon boxes. I was like, dude, I'm not paying you. I know the last sold of Gym Challenge first edition box was $30,000. They're like, well, how about $40,000? Or I'll give you a huge discount down to $20,000. My instinct was very concerned that a $400 box I had purchased was now $30,000, $40,000. Like, I get in Magic, like a Legends booster box peaked at like $50,000. And I had bought some Legends booster boxes for like $40,000, $45,000 actually, towards the top. And now a Legends booster box is $25,000, $30,000. So it's down 40, 50% even now through a good year of 2024. So, but a $25,000 box spiking to $50,000, going back to $25,000, to me is still within the range of being realistic and acceptable. In 2018, when that box was $400, like a Legends box, even in 2018 through 2020, was still $5,000, $10,000. So the percentage moves on that scale were still what I considered more realistic than 400 to 40,000. 8,000 to 40,000, it's still insane, but it's not on a percentage scale. It didn't seem unrealistic. So that was the first thing I noticed, was the Pokemon thing. And a lot of people were criticizing me because I didn't buy, and I wouldn't buy, some of the vintage Pokemon boxes at the prices, and I wouldn't buy vintage Pokemon slabbed cards because I thought the prices were just outrageous, and I was okay missing out and being wrong. I was okay with that. You have to know your place in this world and know some battles. You have to know when to walk away, and I did. So that brings us to 2022. Now, when we went into 2022, I wasn't mentally prepared for a two-year battle of constantly like losing patrons, losing views, constant just nasty messages, and constant, I almost feel like defending the fort, like holding the line, you know? I wasn't mentally prepared because I didn't realize I was going into this 2-year gauntlet where like life was going to test me on all the insane inventory and everything I had done, you know, and it was going to like test me to see like, hey, you going to hold, you going to stay the course, you going to hold it? Because I had no idea we were about to go through a 2-year straight decline with a grand finale boss battle at the end, which was 2023 at the end. And I didn't know the grand finale boss battle after a bad market was going to be Wizards of the Coast themselves, with Mark Rosewater launching the Magic 30 reprint of the collector's edition that they said they would never do. And that was the nuclear shockwave that rippled through the world of CCGs. That moment will be studied and discussed in history, in historical case theories, colleges, businesses, Hasbro, Chris Cox. Yes, he's still the CEO, Dr. Cox, even though it's like a meme. That is still the real CEO of Hasbro to this day. Cynthia Williams, the president of Wizards, and some of her awful decisions. She's gone. And don't worry, she's working with Funko Pops now. Nobody knew, after, including me, that I was walking into a 2-year gladiator coliseum of an uphill battle of just Pound Town. And then once I would make it to the end of that 2 years of a bear market, of 2022, all of 2023, I didn't realize that the Mac Daddy Diablo boss at the end was going to be Wizards themselves, nuking Magic the Gathering and fracturing the credibility, the consumer confidence, the collectors, the investors. Everybody would just immediately backpedal, and it would be a permanent line in the sand. Nobody knew that when that boss music turned on, nobody knew it was going to be Mark Rosewater, Cynthia, with Chris Cox on top, into the Ultimate Power Ranger. Nobody knew. And that would be the ultimate nail in the coffin that would shatter through the world and would stunt, freeze, and stop all growth and money flowing to Magic the Gathering. So, and by the way, as of the filming of this video, November 2024, it has now been another year, and vintage Magic has still not recovered. And as there's been no substantial upticks, there's been some steady movement and sideways and a few pennies up and down. I call it market noise, nothing dramatic enough. Since that nail in the coffin, there has still been no signs of life of tremendous attraction to the reserve list or vintage Magic. Obviously, you're talking to the guy with 8 figures of vintage Magic. You know, my vintage Magic position alone is probably between $10 and $30 million just in vintage. And obviously, with inflation, everything doing well, that position has just done nothing and has been very disappointing. Could have put it all in Nvidia, could have been a billionaire, and I could have fucking bought Hasbro, right? Is that that's what we should be saying? Shoulda, woulda, coulda. Could have put all in Bitcoin, and 20, 30 million would be hundreds of millions, and, you know, I could have just bought Hasbro. But that's where it's at. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. Nothing we can do about it. That is it. But I still was not mentally understanding the depth of the pain, the LGSs that were going to collapse after COVID, and how bad the road to 2024 was going to be. Because you got to understand, ladies and gentlemen, we just went through the COVID thing, shutting down stores, in-person play, the mask, social distance, can't clean your Black Lotus with bleach, all these things that had happened in memes on the internet and dramatic stuff. You know, so the stores that didn't make it were already beaten down. They were weakened and they were in rough shape. And then comes the survival post-COVID, and then you go into the 2-year destruction of magic, led by Cynthia Williams, overprinting, panicked then, and then she panicked because distributors wouldn't take the product. She created the Amazon dumps, and Magic 30 put a nice cherry on top for all of us to just make eye contact with. You know, it's then going into 2023, Scarlet Violet for Pokemon hit. And now new Pokemon was deemed over with and garbage and everything. And I had many moments that I knew going through this 2-year moment, I knew I had to accumulate as much inventory as possible and stay the course no matter how insanely stupid it sounded. Because I knew there was only going to be 2 outcomes. There was a chance that I just implode myself and become a case study for hundreds of years from now on the internet. Or B, the underdog, which is I was right, and things would turn. Scarlet and Violet was not trash, and new magic was not trash. Now, in the face of this, I'd say I was probably losing from 2022 through 2023. I'd say on a normal month, I was losing 100 to 300 patrons, probably a month we were shedding. Because what then had happened, which I was never prepared for, was selling, at the time I think it was $84 Magic draft boxes. Because we didn't have play boxes yet. So kind of the foundation of what I do is sell cheap draft boxes as a courtesy, even if patrons don't want anything else, is suddenly, with every store failing, I don't want to say failing, that's too much, with many stores having a capital crunch and inflation starting to skyrocket and gas skyrocketing and everything started to shift into the real hard, cruel summer of 2022. Store owners and LGSs then instructed we need to go into survival mode and started to unload and dump everything they could off the books. Old Magic, Bronze Era Magic from 2011 to 2019, modern flashy Magic from 2020 to 2022. Everything had to be sold to raise capital to keep the lights on. So what happened then is every Magic set would come out in tank. Even draft boxes that I would sell for $84 shipped. I know now today, after years later in inflation, now it's $91 shipped. I know, rip off Rudy. Hashtag rip off Rudy. I noticed that the sales and volume of patrons buying cheap draft boxes was declining month over month for like a year straight. And in the previous 6 years, I'd never seen that before. So that told me that the consumer confidence in Magic and the direction of all this stuff, I could tell what everybody believed was coming, and I could tell what everyone's attitude was. And I could see the data, and that's what I go by. I report on this channel, not really a lot of excitement or anger. I like to report what I see going on with the numbers. Now, some people like to say that I've manipulated numbers to my own narrative, and some people just don't like to hear that because it doesn't feel good when I say these things, but I do the best I can. Sometimes the numbers can trick us, and sometimes Rudy gets things wrong, and that's okay. That's part of being a meat popsicle. But overall, I think I've done pretty good over the last decade, and I think about that, and I'm like, you know, you look back at the whole thing, and I remember, I even remember patrons, like a new patron would be like, hey man, Rudy, I love your videos, thanks for being here. Why are you overcharging like double or 50% or 30% or double TCG player pricing. I remember that became a thing in 2022 and 2023, where a patron would close their account, so their slot would pop up, and somebody else would grab their slot. And then I would immediately get a message from the day saying, Rudy, hey, I'm interested in buying Kamigawa Draft, and you're selling it for 84. I'm just picking a box, by the way. And I see it online for, I don't know, 82 or 78 or 81. Why are you overcharging and ripping everybody off? Knowing that obviously, these boxes I'm selling were already being sold with no profit. Ask anyone who owns a business, there's no money in doing that. It's a courtesy play. It's a front loading just as a thank you for supporting and watching the channel. It's been that way for a decade. So then I was like, wow, so if this is the new era and every product just collapses and every store sells it at a loss to flush it off the books, it doesn't give Rudy much of a competitive edge. It doesn't give Rudy much of an interesting direction, right? So that led to a lot of complications, and that led to an increase of the people making anti-Rudy videos, Rudy hate videos, and bashing. And look at this, why would anybody buy this? And they're still out there. They're tougher to find because most of them get very little views. And like I told you guys, you really can't build a business bashing another store or business. It just doesn't work long term. But I remember that it was like a big growing bandwagon of, why would, not to mention the extra shipping and taxes and fees that would be levied on the other on public websites, but that's not the point. The issue was stores, every Magic set would come out. Streets of Capenna would come out. Okay, and then I can't remember the order. Or Infinity. Oh, that was a great one. Infinity would come out. And then Dominaria United would come out. Brothers War would come out. March of the Machine Draft and Brothers War would come out. And remember, at the end was Wildsville Drain and Ixalan. That was more towards the end of 2023. So that's more. But these sets would come out, and I'm trying to sell them for 84. I think maybe it was 86 then. I don't remember when they did the inflation and Wizards raised their prices. But I remember TCG Player, the prices would be so low. I remember other stores messaging me saying, how does this work, Rudy? Like, we're not able to sell anything because every box is being sold at a loss online. So that led to another interesting fork in the road. I can't lower the prices because they're already being sold at a loss. I can't drop them to $60, $70 a box at the time when Wizards and distribution charges, I don't know, 86 a box or 88 at the time, and I'm already charging 84, 80. I don't remember which price increase this was in which period, but you get the idea. So I said, well, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just keep doing what we've always done, and let's let nature do its course, do the best we can. We offer what I feel is already an amazing price. People don't want it anymore. They don't want it anymore. I get stuck with all the heavy bags. And, well, that goes back to, I'll end up being a Netflix documentary and a case study of the guy who lost it all to cardboard, right? Right? It all goes to zero, right? That was the meme. So then there was like a period where I think I had dinner with the family or something. I was sitting there. Maybe we were at like a Chick-fil-A or something, and the little guy and the kids were running around. And I was just sitting there, and I made a comment. I remember thinking, what's happening isn't sustainable. I think I had a really good waffle fry. Like, it was perfectly salted. It was like a really big one. You know what I'm talking about? Where it's crunchy, but just soft enough. Yeah, I got you guys. And I remember I had this moment of like, well, hang on a second. If there's 3,000 stores, 2,000, let's say 1,000 go under in this thing. If there's 2,000 stores in the United States, and a Magic set comes out, and a store gets 60 draft boxes, and they sell 12 or 20 of them at release, make 10, 20 bucks a box, whatever. But then the last 30 of those 60 draft boxes had to be sold at a loss on TCG Player. I had a moment where I realized, well, hang on a minute. Hold on, princess. And I realized, I was like, once that employee who's told to dump those in TCG Player dumps those 30 boxes, the owner of the LGS is not going to reorder a Magic box after release. Right? So I had to make these assumptions and theories and theorems, and I had to make the Rudy theorems and the Rudy analysis, and I was sitting there going, after every store dumps at a loss, the store's going to fall off. That listing on eBay or TCG Player, eventually, it's going to go away because when they sell out, unlike a successful product, the store is not going to reorder. If the store doesn't reorder, the distributor doesn't reorder from Wizards of the Coast. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the moment that the Texas warehouse and some of the other smaller warehouses in the United States for Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro's inventory started going crazy. Because distributors stopped reordering. Because stores stopped reordering. Because the public lost consumer confidence. So, that was the moment I said, well, hang on. Eventually, there's going to be a day where the 2,000 stores who have these boxes that are toxic assets that they're selling to get off their books to raise money to stay in business in this inflationary environment, eventually they're all going to flush it out and they're never going to reorder it. Now that creates new problems because now Hasbro and Wizards can't print to oblivion and print to demand because now if stores don't contact distributors and buy what the distributor has, the pallet of the set or whatever, the distributor's not going to contact WotC or their email their rep and say, hey, is this open order? Give us 2 fucking pallets of Dominaria United. They're not going to do that. And the whole machine and gear and the wheel in the sky stops turning. And I knew another fact of life. The wheel in the sky always turns. And I knew that the wheel in the sky was grinding to a halt because this whole ecosystem, because dumb fucks that are all about game pieces, don't understand this because they think Wizards of the Coast is for the community. There's the hug. Just because these people felt this way, I knew the true colors of Hasbro and WotC. They can't do that. They need to sell expensive boxes with cards that have value. And though they're going to pretend like they love you, welcome to Costco. I love you. They're going to pretend just enough so that, 5 roommates, Taco Bell, broken toilet, and they're, I'd be angry too. We've been over that. I knew there'd be a time when the machine would slow down and the wheel in the sky would grind up. But I knew there'd be a moment where it would start moving at full force again. Because the data told me in the common basic finance and supply and demand economics, efficient frontier, the curve, blah, 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 all this dumb educational shit they force you to know. I knew there was a moment that if the players in the ecosystem are just selling at losses, they will never reorder again. And eventually, one by one, the domino would fall off. So now we're at about the end of 2022, 2023. Shedding patrons, dealing with the most amount of hate and anger I've ever seen in the decade I've been on here. Because, well, everybody's believes the internet that this was it. And then I started to evolve again, going into 2023, Magic 30. And I started to realize something else. Then the Next Epiphany had hit me. Remember, these are all Rudy theories. I didn't know if I was going to be right or wrong, but I knew I had to try. So then the next thing hit me, which was based on my original theory ABC, which was employers are telling employees to dump all their inventory to raise capital, get off the books, and move on to the next set. Number 2, when that inventory is gone, they won't reset. Number 3, because of that, it's going to backlog the system. Number 4, eventually, the wheel in the sky will start turning at full force again. So based on those first 4 Rudy assumptions, I also knew that led to the holy land of number 5. And that was the new frontier of whenever things would tilt. I knew when we came back to normal, all these products would be gone. And I knew it would create a vacuum of all these products that aren't being held, which would create an accelerated recovery, which will create faster price swings, which would also create a lot of resistance to accept what's going to happen. That was kind of the final frontier I knew would come. Now, I thought 2024 was going to be the start of that tilt. I did not expect 2024 to be this red hot, full Monty, absolute insane pump train, stock market, Bitcoin, collectible. I had no idea. And you have to remember, in this time frame, all these nights, probably 50 to 100 of these nights, there was moments I sat back and I was like, I am draining my bank accounts buying these pallets of product. I am buying, a pallet of every draft set. And then, of course, 2023, I'm buying pallets, plural, 2,000 boxes. Scarlet Violet base set. 1,500 boxes. Paradox Rift. 2,000 boxes. Paldea Evolved. And I'm just like, and of course, the internet was just nasty. It was cruel. It was difficult. And it definitely made me question that maybe for the first time, the internet is right, and I am way wrong. And that was a scary thing, because that would mean that the whole foundation of this whole ecosystem is permanently different, and everything I had assumed and made decisions based on was no longer a valid concept. So that was another very dangerous thing. So there were some moments, and I may go into the Lord of the Rings holiday special again. I've touched on it a few times, but that was, and I know I may have already published another video. I'm sure you guys saw Lord of the Rings holiday special, $1,500 a box. It's going to be $2,000 to $5,000 a box, but whatever. I'm sure you guys, whatever. But we had things like the Baldur's Gate, the Commander Legends 2, where they took out Mana Drain, and it really shouldn't have been called Commander Legends 2. It should have just been called Baldur's Gate. Then we had the Commander Masters in 2023. We had the Epilogue Aftermath situation collapse. And then all the new Pokemon sets did terrible, were being sold at a loss. It was and then of course the regular Magic sets were just, Brothers War, Dominar United, March of the Machine, Phyrexia, all will be 69. I thought all the sets were great. Wizards was adding serialized cards. They were already making adjustments to the print run, but nobody cared because the confidence was gone. So, to tell you all that it was very difficult would be one of the most diluted, watered down emotions I can give you. It was fucking scary. It was fucking tough. And to be ridiculed, and then to be, because you guys know I'm all about the data. I can take the ridicule and everything. I'm used to it for the last decade. But when I see the nasty patron messages and the closing the account, because it's like, why be a patron when I can buy these draft boxes for $78 and Rudy's charging $88? And this happened with, I remember even Phyrexia, all will be 69. I think at the time those were $88 a box before the price increase and everything. I don't remember which one. And it barely sold. And I remember people not buying that from me. They're like, really? And then it feeds on itself. And because remember, when people are angry or they feel like they've been bamboozled, it's the human's brain's next goal to tell as many people as you can as a way of kind of closure and satisfaction. It feels better. If you feel like somebody scammed you, you want to tell everybody so they get that reaction of, whoa, you're trying to make peace with it. It feels good. And I get that. I'd probably do the same thing, But it caused a loss of, I guess, confidence. It caused a lot of fractures into the Rudy system at that time. Because you have to remember, not only was I shedding patrons, the YouTube channel's views were tanking, nobody cared. The volume of Magic boxes was declining like crazy. I remember there were even days the entire patron army didn't even buy a single $88 draft box. Not Lost Caverns of Ixalan, not Wildsville Drain, not Phyrexia, not Kamigawa, not Brothers War, not Streets of Capenna, not Baldur's Gate. I couldn't even sell these boxes for $80-something shipped. And I remember thinking, wow, so maybe we had a good run. And, maybe the young Timmies and the emotional social media warriors, the internet police, maybe they're right for the first time. And maybe I'm just not willing to accept that things had changed. I began to really question whether or not that this was, could have been the end. Now, obviously, financially, you hit certain levels in life where I don't want to use the term too big to fail, because that's a dangerous, cocky line to use where it makes you more oblivious and blind to mistakes. So I don't like that phrase. But, my situation at this point being, after the amount of investments and things I've done for the last 20 something years, there's, even when there's a downturn and the inventory, declines on paper by millions and millions of dollars. I mean, there's not really going to be a point where I can kind of go to zero per se. Mostly because I have no leverage. So if you've got $100 million and you leverage it to $200 million, your $200 million goes to $300 million, you think you're hot stuff because you only borrowed $100 million. Now you're at $300 million. Well, if you leverage $100 million with your $100 million and you have $200 million, and that $200 million drops by 50%, which we saw happen with inventory, you lose $100 million. So now you're down to $100 million and you owe $100 million, so you go to zero. And that is how bankruptcies and reorgs and Chapter 7 liquidations or 11 reorgs and all these things happen with companies that are cocky and companies that don't manage the risk properly. Now, I designed all this stuff to be sustainable no matter how bad the market would be. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it, you all. By the time we hit the summer of 2023, it was put to the test. And some of this stuff was put to the test. Like, I was like, do I need to pull cash from my brokerage account? And do we have to make some real decision? There were some moments that were a little scary. Nobody wants to be in a capital crunch or, some sort of where you run out of liquidity and you're forced to sell or liquidate at prices you don't want to do, which we saw happen with all the products online. So now we start to approach 2024. And I started making videos in November and December of 2023 saying, hey, everybody, I'm getting some really good data. And I think things are about to be really, really good. Now, from November to about February, March, about the first 4 months of talking about that, I'd put a positive video out, and the views would be like 5,000 views instead of 20 to 50,000. Like, literally, people would see the topic and they just said, oh my God, look at this heavy bag, dumb fuck, don't care. And that led to me making funny memes of negative video titles. And I would take the graph that's going up now and I'd flip it upside down so you guys see a graph going down, because that's where that came from. Because nobody wanted to believe it. And that's very textbook of a bull market, is that usually the public is very resilient to the first half of the bull market, which is historically, like on Wall Street or even Bitcoin or real estate, the average person misses out on a majority of the movement and cannot capture the majority of the gains, because by the time they come around to it, it's not saying the bull market's over, but they missed a chunk of it, usually half of it, or maybe 60% of it. So because you miss out a chunk, it makes it more challenging, and it levers up the risk, and the second half of the return is usually softer. So it gets more difficult. So obviously, as you all can imagine how the story is going to end, the value of my inventory at the end of 2024 has appreciated $10 to $20 million just in inventory appreciation. Just saying that out loud doesn't even seem real. It doesn't even feel, I feel like I'm playing a video game, or I'm playing Final Fantasy VII, or I'm playing some sort of old Squaresoft RPG on PlayStation 1. And so it doesn't really feel real to me, because it doesn't change anything. It doesn't really, it's more of like a pat on the back, or, I kind of rub my ball and just kind of say, good job. It just kind of doesn't really, like, it's a thing, but I don't know. Because I guess maybe realizing how quick markets can turn on you. it makes it bittersweet and also more difficult to enjoy some of the success and some of the appreciation, because you know that you can lose millions and it can swing on you. And so now, obviously, when I just did inventory the other day, and I look at like over 1,000 boxes of Wildsville Drain collectors, and I just shake my head because I couldn't sell them at $189. I look at 300 boxes of Lord of the Rings Holiday Special, and of course, yes, one of the giant cases has a dent because I threw it because I was so angry at those 250 fucking stupid dollar boxes that everybody made fun of me for trying to push. So I see those boxes, and 300 boxes of Lord of the Rings Holiday at $1,500 a box. I mean, you're talking like $500,000 just in that. And it's just the most successful, profitable sealed magic collector box in history is the one that nobody has. There are just things in life sometimes, the way they work is so surreal. Like, you can't script this stuff, man. The Bannings of the Commander Rules Committee, Hasbro, whatever the fuck that shit show was, with Mana Crypt and Jeweled Lotus, and then how they took it over, and they're going to make tiers, and it's partially unbanned, and it's only in certain tiers, and just all this stuff. And it's crazy. It really is crazy. And now I look at the whole thing of the Brothers War collectors towards all-time high. Phyrexia collectors, all-time high. March of the Machine collectors towards all-time high. Infinity collectors within 5% of all-time high. Doctor Who collectors, all-time high. Ravnica Remastered, all-time high. Ixalan collectors, all-time high. Karlov Manor collectors, recovered back to almost $200 a box. And then you go to the new stuff. Bloomborough collectors, all-time high. Duskmourn collectors, can't get them, all-time high, don't even have any. Brand new stuff. Foundation collectors, can't get them, all-time high. And then you see the other side of that darkness. And now you see the brightest of crazy and just shenanigans. Baldur's Gate collector boxes. I wish I could tell you guys the story of what went on with that. But, as you know, recently, I ran a sale to patrons for Baldur's Gate collectors. And I sold them for $119 a box. Collectors. They're $230 now. All the way up to $199 a box if you were a new patron. By the case. So new patrons got $250 off market price. Old patrons got $1,500 off market price on one sale. And I still have the other 3,000 boxes of Baldur's Gate collectors. And, I don't know, folks. It's difficult to enjoy and appreciate certain money and finances and, I guess, wealth when the road you've taken on it's just been so turbulent. But maybe that's how a lot of people with businesses feel. I don't know. It makes it difficult to spend the money. It makes it, I don't know. It makes me scared of the money almost. It makes me not want to spend the money because it just, it's shaky. Let's jump to another thing. So obviously, if you're a patron, I've been taking Bitcoin and Ethereum and a few small altcoins, but mostly 90% Bitcoin, Ethereum. I've been taking these payments to sell cards for 5 years. I'm not going to disclose what I have and where it's at and the details and everything, but just the Bitcoin thing and Ethereum thing, all that has treated me beyond anything I had ever imagined. Because, well, in 5 years of selling cards and taking crypto, unlike stores and other businesses, I never converted the crypto to cash. So in the last 5 years, I've been taking Bitcoin from thousands of patrons. And my Bitcoin cost basis is about maybe $22,000 a coin per coin, whole coin. And to see Bitcoin at 100,000, or technically 98 or 99 or whatever it is right now, is another animal that I never really planned on in my life and didn't know I would be 5xing after selling the cards, taking the payments, And I just decided to not convert the cash out of the crypto, and I left it. I wrote it down in the crash of 22 and 23, and then people laughed at me because I sold a bunch of cards for 5 years, and my cost basis in Bitcoin was 20-something thousand a coin, and it dropped to like 16,000. And I remember friends locally saying, Rudy, you did all the work selling cards, and then the payment you took was Bitcoin, and then you lost half your money holding their payment. That is a terrible business model. And then that turned out to be, sometimes now I just look at the screen and I'm going, is that real? And then last but not least, we go to some other things. I don't want to focus too much on the smaller card games because not many people, the Weiss, the Force of Will, because not many of y'all connect to that as much, but the principle of everything is the same. And so I want to just add that the Pokemon thing. Before we end the video here, the goal going into Scarlet Violet, after building the Mega position in Sword and Shield, was to build the largest sealed Pokemon booster box position in the United States, if not world. That was the goal. That was just the fucking goal. Because I knew, number one, it would be easy to do. And number two, nobody else was doing it. So I had no competition. So I knew that was maybe not a bad idea. So the goal was for me to build a Scarlet Violet position that seemed surreal and seemed off the chart impossible. And I'm sitting before you all today that I can tell you, like, I haven't revealed all my Scarlet Violet sealed product positions, but I can tell you all, I will be honest with you all, like, I believe we're crossing 15,000 Scarlet Violet booster boxes. Now, what am I going to do with that? I have no idea. And yes, folks, I've got 1,000 boxes of Surging Sparks. I've got 4,000 boxes of Paldea. No, 3,500 boxes of Paldea. I'm sorry. 3,500 boxes of Paldea. 1,400 boxes of Twilight. 1,500 boxes of Stellar. And, and the difference is, thankfully, there's not a lot of Rudys out there. Because I think we would have some serious ecosystem, secondary market problems if there were a lot of Rudys. So thankfully there's not a lot of Rudys, because I feel like that would actually be a bad thing. Because I think if there were a lot of Rudys, it could actually cause harm in actual potential for manipulation and actually danger to the market's health and stability. Like if there were 10 Rudys, you're talking now like going towards like 100,000 boxes. And now you're talking about, I don't want to go into Pokemon print run information because the stuff I do know, number one, if I tell you the truth, you won't believe me. Number two, if I make it up, you still won't believe me. So I don't touch Pokemon print run informations. All I want to tell you is this. I will say one thing about Pokemon Scarlet Violet and print runs. This concept that Pokemon prints 1 million boxes of every set is just, it's kind of a meme and a joke when we pack and ship our orders at night, or if I play YouTube, or I do customer service messages with patrons every night. It's kind of a joke and a meme that Pokemon prints 1 million boxes every set, because that's what dumb fucks think. They just don't. People who are negative are always, they swing to the rubber band extreme of severe negativity. And the people who are euphoric, and the millions of Poketubers out there right now, they are overly bullish. And most of these people have not been through the other side of the market cycle for XY era, Sun and Moon era, which was kind of and of course the beginning of Scarlet Violet from a couple years. Most people haven't been through it. I don't want to be like lame or negative, but a lot of this kind of stuff, I'm kind of dead on the inside. It doesn't do much for me. It doesn't get a rise out of me. The average person thinking, oh my God, you get 1,000 boxes of Surging Sparks, like I forget about it until I walk by the pallet. And I'm like, oh shit, that's a full sealed pallet. That's still the same quantity. It's wrapped and it's the same thing. Okay. It doesn't, and I feel like it's a dangerous thing. I feel like, that's why I say I'm glad there's not a lot of Rudys out there. Like when people talk about poker investing and sealed box and everything, people just say, "Oh God, you're no Rudy of Alpha Investments." Like that shouldn't be a negative thing. I think it's a positive thing, because I don't think the level that I've pushed into now is good for the game and the boxes if there were a lot of Rudys. It's too much power. And I feel like in the wrong hands, it would be dangerous. Now, I know some of you guys are going to criticize what I'm saying, but I'm just rambling. But in my opinion, my perspective is so stable and non-emotional. I mean, you're talking to a guy that had 4,000 Scarlet Violet boxes at the beginning of the era when everybody was selling them at losses and nobody could sell them at all. And I had 4,000 boxes at the beginning of this era. And when I first showed my first palette of Scarlet Violet, people just made fun of me. And I think, that's what I'm saying, it takes balls of steel and just zero emotion. And I think that's the kind of person you want to control the inventory, because I think that is the most healthy for the market. Because, I mean, what would happen if I went on TCG Player right now and I put 3,000 boxes of Paldea Evolve for $99 on there? Would the market just buy it all up and then just go right back to 140? Would I permanently damage the market? I mean, what would happen? What would happen? What would happen? So, stuff like that. Now long term, I don't think it matters. I don't think the Rudy is that big of a deal. I don't think I'm that important. I think the market's bigger than the normal human mindset can understand. And there's a lot of, because the thing that is most Pokemon palettes are supplementary palettes. Like if there's a Pokemon warehouse with 1,000 pallets, 900. I'm getting kind of, I don't really know. I'll finish this statement. 900 of the 1,000 pallets are supplementary, non-booster box pallets. And 10% of Pokemon pallets are actual booster boxes. I don't want to go further into that for risking some things that might be identifiable, and I don't want to get people in trouble or connections or employees or people who may work at a millennial person group, and I don't want to mess with that conversation. I'm just telling you, the public, many times I've learned there are things that I understand why the public is not told, because it's used against the company or the individual, which is a kind of a crappy thing. It's just kind of, it goes against the whole free speech and censorship thing. But the public just doesn't handle some things very well. So I just wanted to share, this was part of the journey of the last 2 years before we hit 2024. And why I want to end the video by saying, understand everything I just told you all about the dark times of 2 years of pain, suffering, questioning, sanity, draining bank account, buying shit that just sells at losses. I want you to understand that when you go to your local LGS, you should be thanking them if they're still in business. Like, it's not something to ridicule people because of that. It's something to be proud of.